The Minnesota Vikings will stay undefeated against the Detroit Lions, but not everybody agrees. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Damian Parson. Obviously, I usually do the FanDuel Friday with the mastermind, Ross Jackson, but he had the, I won't say pleasure, I'll say punishment of covering that New Orleans Saints team on Thursday Night Football. And we're going to talk about that Broncos beatdown in the Bayou. But first, we got some actual good football games to talk about in Week 7. We got a Super Bowl rematch. We got some battles in the NFC North. Before we get into it, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's FanDuel Friday is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So we do like to call it a FanDuel Friday, looking at some of the best games, look at some of the betting angles in some of those games. Do got to remind all my folks at home, the madman did go 5-0 last week and called this Broncos beatdown. So before I pull some muscles, pat myself on the back, let's get into this first matchup, an NFC North battle between the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions. I think that the Vikings are going to be able to stay undefeated in this one. Dame, I know that you don't necessarily agree with that.
I think the Lions take this game. I do think, of course, losing Aidan Hutchinson, that's a big loss, right? Because Aidan Hutchinson is the type of guy who can change the game. And Sam Darnold, who has played much better this season than any point in his career, right? Aidan Hutchinson is the type of guy that you need to make him uncomfortable. Once he gets uncomfortable, then you start to see, matter of fact, you go back to, even though they won the game, the Jets game, he didn't look great. He wasn't the same guy we saw the first couple weeks of the season. He was kind of, making poor decisions, wasn't as accurate as he typically was, things of that nature. And I think with Detroit and that two-headed running attack that they have with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, you kind of help Jared Goff not have to deal with Brian Flores' ridiculous schemes that are fooling quarterbacks week in and week out.
Well, Dame, I think you might be onto something because my guy Matt Derry from Locked On Lions was thinking the same thing.
I really believe that the Lions have got to just pound, and this is simple, and it's maybe very cliche, but it's got to be that Dan Campbell football. It's got to be the Ragnows, the Sewells, the Deckers. Zeitler's been good, and Glasgow. That group of five with Skipper as that sixth. Sort of
ridiculous that line
just smashes people. If they're pounding the football, they're running Montgomery, they're running Gibbs, and they're keeping the Vikings off the field, and then they get into the red zone and then they pound it in. That's the key. To me, it's got to be what they've been doing the last few weeks. Montgomery has been amazing. He's been fantastic. So much so that they gave him a 2-year extension last week. So that's it. To me, it's that simple. I think the Lions can throw on Minnesota. They've gotten in a good rhythm, but I think they want to start off with establishing the run, getting first downs on the ground, taking the crowd out of it, and playing that bully ball that helped them win 12 games last year.
I don't think that Matt is wrong, Dame, but here is the one thing that I would say. The second best rushing defense in the entire NFL is the Minnesota Vikings, giving up only 67.2 yards per game. I think that the Lions are going to struggle to run the ball as consistently as they have been lately, despite the talent on the O-line. And I think that the loss of Aidan Hutchinson is massive. It's going to keep Sam Darnold from making some of those mistakes and turnovers because the Lions simply don't have enough in the pass rush. That's why I am taking the Minnesota Vikings -1.5 at home. I think they remain undefeated. That is my best bet of the week right there.
No, I listen, and you make great point, especially with the run defense. I think with Ben Johnson calling the plays and understanding how to use both, because last year I felt like he didn't. It took him a while to figure out how to get Jahmyr Gibbs going, and now that he knows how to get Jahmyr, that two-headed, it reminds me so much of like Lindell White and Chris Johnson. You know what I mean, from those old Titans days where David Montgomery is that Lindell White, that powerhouse. He's going to set the tone. Okay, we get 3 yards in a cloud of dust. We'll take that. But then you get the speed, the explosiveness, the burst that is Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think that this could be a game where they get him more involved in the passing attack and get him matched up on those linebackers for Minnesota and start to, because Ivan Pace that he's undrafted player that they have on that level for Minnesota.
Cincinnati.
He's a madman. He loves to get hill, play physical, but what you want to do is get him out in space and try to exploit him in coverage.
Well, that's what I'm thinking is if Minnesota can slow down the rushing attack, get Jared Goff into some of those 3rd and long situations where he can't be under center and play action, which he's done so well over the years, that's when Minnesota can unleash those complex blitzes where you got safeties dropping back from the line of scrimmage into deep half and doing all that crazy Brian Flores stuff. So it'll be interesting to watch that one play out, but I do like the Vikings in that one. Moving on to another NFC North team, the Green Bay Packers are hosting the Houston Texans. It's going to be a great matchup, and I think the key to that is the Houston Texans defensive ends, and my guy Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers talked about his concern there.
It's don't let those defensive ends wreck the game. Yeah. If you don't let those guys, especially at this point where the defense, the best players are now Hunter, Anderson, and Stingley. And I think the rest of that back 7, if you're playing 2 backup linebackers, a backup corner, a backup safety, that back 7 is potentially vulnerable. So if you can block it up front, I'm thinking heavy play action where you get these 2-man concepts, Christian Watson over the top. They're running dagger. They're running Yankee. They're running all these big inbreaker, Kyle Shanahan kind of stuff that theoretically the Texans have seen in practice every day for 2 years.
Yeah.
Then I think the Packers can move the ball. I kind of like this matchup for the Packers right now. I'm going to be honest. I like the Packers in this game. Something like 27-23, 27-24, something like that. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a good game. But I do think the Packers at home, they're clicking right now offensively in a way that the Texans are not.
I don't think Pete is wrong. I think that the Packers can attack over the middle of the field against the Texans defense. That's where you want to attack. But I just want to say one thing. Jordan Love right now is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL under pressure. And with the pressure that Will Anderson, who just got AFC Defensive Player of the Week, and then Danielle Hunter, who's been getting pressure on Packers quarterbacks for a long time, with the pressure that they can create, if the Texans can avoid some of those 2nd and short situations against the Packers, I think they're going to be able to get to Jordan Love. He's going to make mistakes. I like the Texans money line in this one, plus 124 on FanDuel. I don't even want the points. I think the Texans win straight up.
This is going to be a fun game to watch. I'm excited about this game. 2 high-level quarterbacks playing really high-level football.
Yeah,
and even though they're home, and I really do want to lean, Green Bay. But like you said, Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, Danielle knows that franchise from his time in Minnesota. DeMeco Ryans understanding how to pressure quarterbacks, understanding what part of the drop in the pocket is Jordan. He's really good at it's similar to me. I always parallel basketball and football. It's one thing to be a 3-point shooter, right? And you're just off a man, you're coming off a pin down, you get into the corner, easy 3. It's different. We're playing 2-3 zone and we're forcing you to make that 3-point shot. That's because we're not going to let you get to the paint. For Love, he likes to kind of that fadeaway throw off his back foot, leaning backwards. It's one thing to do that in the pocket when you know you're not getting hit because your offensive line's got everything solidified. It's a different thing when you're forced to lean back because Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter are firing off on all cylinders and coming off the edge with their ears pinned back. I do believe that Houston could give them some issues in this game. The main thing for me offensively is going to be for Houston, Joe Mixon, getting that run game going, that play action for Houston with CJ Stroud. Not having Nico, I want to see them get Stephon Diggs going this week. Yes. Without Nico Collins last week, I felt like it was a Tank Dell type of day for them last week. Get Stephon Diggs going. You don't have Big Nico. Get Stephon Diggs going. You brought him in for a reason. Not saying you don't target Dell, but get Diggs going in this game. I'm going to kind of lean. I'm going to lean Texans in this situation. Sorry, Peter. I'm going to lean Texans. I think C.J. Stroud, the run game, Will Anderson in that defense. If hopefully the guys who didn't practice on Thursday will be able to practice today and going into Saturday, so they can be fully go on the defense side of the ball. But I'm going to roll with Houston.
I love it. I love it. Anytime I get agreement on the show with all these knuckleheads that are always disagreeing with me every day, I love it, Dame. But let's see if we agree on a couple of other games coming up. The Baltimore Ravens and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a Super Bowl rematch between the Chiefs and the 49ers, and I think that line is out of whack. We're going to talk about it. Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Luka Doncic or an Ellie De La Cruz or a Mahomes rookie card, it just isn't in the cards. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that I listed was hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your pools are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. Arena Club's grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent, with a full grade rationale provided and explanation of how your card was scored. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for 10% off your first purchase. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy sports the most fun and most simple that it can be. That's why they have over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy sports accessible to all because you just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Remember, just 2 to 6 players, you say more or less. Justin Jefferson, 83.5 receiving yards. Patrick Mahomes, 267.5 passing yards. Tyreek Hill, 97.5 receiving yards. Saquon Barkley, 67.5 rushing yards. Those are just some examples, but again, it's just more or less. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's the Prize Picks app. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Dame, let's continue this FanDuel Friday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We talked about the Vikings versus the Lions. We're a little split on that one, but we talked about Texans and Packers. Both of us are looking at the Texans to potentially win that game, even though they're on the road and a little bit banged up. But now we got to look at this Super Bowl rematch. We get Kansas City against the San Francisco 49ers, and the Chiefs are underdogs in this one, and I'm not the only person that think that's a little weird.
Chris, are you a little surprised that over at FanDuel.com, the San Francisco 49ers are favored by 1.5 over the Kansas City Chiefs?
Maybe a little bit. The 49ers are a great team. To me, it's not overly surprising. I don't think that they are the team that their record suggests that they are. And in some ways, I think you could argue that the Chiefs aren't the record that their record suggests that they are. They haven't played great through 5 weeks. They're still trying to figure it out on the opposite side of the ball, and defensively they've been great, and I think that's the reason they continue to win.
The stupid league went and gave the Chiefs a bye, though, before the 49ers, too. Niners fans are kind of mad about that right now, Chris, because not only the Chiefs have a bye before this game, next week the Niners play the hated Dallas Cowboys, that even though they've lost 2 Super Bowls to the Chiefs, Niners fans still hate the Cowboys a lot more. Cowboys have a bye before they play the Niners next week as well. So,
oh, boo-hoo. Cry me a river. Oh, other teams get by. Listen, this is crazy. Patrick Mahomes getting points against a team, quite frankly, that he's been better than basically his entire run. They always find a way. And I talked about this last week on the show, and Kyle Shanahan is a guy who it's like he's a high-level Michelin star chef, and he could make you like a steak tartare or steak Diana or some sort of fancy dish that I can't even relate to because I'd never afford it or pay for it, but he can't make you a good cheeseburger. You know what I mean? It's like when he doesn't have all of his special high-level ingredients, they look so average. And Deebo Samuel is not practicing fully consistently this week. Juwan Jennings has been out for 2 days of practice, and maybe these guys practice on Friday and they play in the game. But I'm looking at Kansas City getting 1.5 points. There is no way I can turn down Patrick Mahomes getting points. I'm going with KC in this one.
Yeah, this is an interesting game. I thought Juju Smith-Schuster is questionable for the game. I think on Sunday and everything with I think a hamstring or something like that. It just seems like this is the first time we've ever seen Kansas City hit with that injury bug to this extent, especially offensively, right? But I think as Chris talked about, this defense that Kansas City has is legitimate, man. Like their front four, their linebacker play, safety play, corners, even though they lost to Jarius Sneed, they still cover well on the back end for the most part. Like this is a defense that, and one of the things that Brock Purdy has struggled with throughout his career is defeating tight press man coverage. Guys are in the hip pockets of his receivers. There's not much room, and fitting those keyhole passes past the ear hole of those second level defenders. Can you consistently do that? I don't expect Spags to give him his bread and butter, which is zone coverage. I don't think that they're going to give him the thing he feels most comfortable with, but I expect the nightmare of the Super Bowl to rear its ugly head, and that's Chris Jones. Chris Jones is the guy that got into his face, forced a missed throw that caused him to end up losing that game. And I expect him to have a big impact in this game yet again. So I'm looking forward to that. I think Chris Jones, that front four, they're going to be able to get back there to Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy being able to use his legs. Can he get out of the pocket and make the necessary plays with his legs, extend those create second reaction throwing opportunities and everything down the field? But I don't know. I'm picking Kansas City in this one as well, Tyler. I don't think that even though Kansas City isn't firing on all cylinders, they're not the healthiest offensively. I think their defense and Spags and Andy Reid, they're going to find out Kareem Hunt. I think we get a lot of Kareem Hunt on Sunday.
Well, two things for me. Number one, I think the Brock Purdy thing is, and Dame, you're a certified ball knower, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But to me, zone coverage has the ability to be beaten more by the coach's mind. You can scheme up open guys to beat certain zone coverages just because at the end of the day, man on man, that's backyard football. Somebody's got to make a play. And I think that Brock Purdy, while being an underrated quarterback, really, he doesn't have the pure arm talent that some of these great elite quarterbacks have. And that makes it harder for him to beat man coverage as compared to Kyle Shanahan's mind beating the zone coverage, which is kind of why we have that discussion.
He's a spot thrower, Tyler. He's a spot thrower who likes to anticipate the window, and if he can see the picture of, okay, what you're showing me pre-snap is basically what you're dropping into post-snap, and he knows his zone. He knows this guy's dropping 3 yards to the right. This guy's dropping 3 yards in the middle, and he knows I got a deep end cut that's going to work right behind one of these droppers. I can fit that ball right in there because I'm throwing it early. But when you're playing man-to-man and you try to throw it early, I wouldn't be surprised if we get some cover one robber, either with one of the safeties rotating down the middle of the field.
Too high.
In the too high, or you get that cover one robber look where you get one of the safeties playing man on the tight end, and you have one of those linebackers playing that middle of the field robber technique, sitting in the middle of the field between the hashes to take away those end breakers. Brock Purdy loves those end breakers. He absolutely loves to throw them. You got to be able to stop the run game with Jordan Mason. First off, I think this defensive line is going to be geared up to do it.
Well, I think if you mix those back and forth with who that intermediate zone defender is going to be in cover one, you have a good chance to confuse Brock Purdy enough. Do it out of single high, then do it out of two high, then bring the linebacker instead and play that chess game so he doesn't know all game long. See, Dave, this is why I like talking to you, man. We're getting into the ball right here. But let's move forward to another great game, the Baltimore Ravens and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Look, in this one, Tampa Bay ran for 277 yards in this last game. And I just think it's going to come down to if the Ravens can bottle up that run game. But Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens talked about this matchup as well.
I think the first thing that the Ravens have to do in this game, I would love it if they were to get off to a fast start against this Tampa team. Like you said, I expect a lot of points in this game both ways. And if the Ravens can get out to a, 10-0, 14-3, let's just say something along those lines type of lead, that will let them play defense more freely. Maybe Tampa will have to abandon the run game at that point. We'll see, how that goes for them. But for the Ravens, they have proven that they can, playing with a lead in the fourth quarter gets a little bit dicey for them, at least over the course of this season. But at least for the first three quarters, they play with a lead pretty well. And then we've also seen, for example, that game against Cincinnati and even the game against Kansas City where they had to come from behind and were just a toe away from beating or tying Kansas City in that game. They've been able to come back in some of these games, but it does not hurt to have a fast start. And I think you can establish momentum in that game. And sometimes when you do that, a la what happened against Buffalo for Baltimore in week 4, Derrick Henry opens that up with an 87-yard touchdown. Sometimes you just don't look back.
That's why I brought up the run game before I even played the clip there from Kevin, because if Baltimore can get out to that early lead, again, Tampa Bay ran for 277 yards last week against the New Orleans Saints. Now, obviously, that's a Saints problem, but we talked about the second best run defense in the NFL with the Vikings earlier. The best run defense, giving up less than 60 yards per game, is the Baltimore Ravens. There ain't no way that the Bucs are going to run the ball anywhere close to the way that they ran the ball last week. I think it totally changes the approach. Honestly, I think Baltimore wins by 10+ in this one. So I am hammering Baltimore -3.5 on the road against Tampa Bay. I don't care. It's a totally different level of football team. And Tampa Bay has been Jekyll and Hyde. When they go up against bad teams, they play well. When they go up against not so great teams, they look like a juggernaut and drop 51 points. So I'm going with Baltimore all the way -3.5 in this one.
Yeah, I don't expect what they did against the Saints to translate over.
And they turned over the ball a ton against the Saints and just didn't have to pay for it because the Saints aren't a good enough football team. The fact that they gave up 24, 27 points to that Saints team with what we just saw from them against Denver, that is alarming to me. I think this one could get out of hand.
No, 100%. And you think about this matchup just in general. Like you said, you threw 3 interceptions. Baker Mayfield threw 3 interceptions against the Saints, but they didn't make him pay for every single one of those. The Baltimore Ravens will absolutely make you pay for every single one of those turnovers. If you keep giving the ball back to Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, it's kind of crazy because I think both are on pace to eclipse 1,000 yards rushing. To have a running back and quarterback duo on pace to both eclipse 1,000 yards rushing is absolutely insane. And I think the run game is going to be big. Of course, Vita Vea and that matchup between him and Tyler Linderbaum is going to be very pivotal because honestly, Vita Vea is the type of guy that can give Tyler Linderbaum problems because he's quick off the ball, but his power is so overwhelming. And he's a good pass rusher, a true 3-down nose tackle, 1 tech, 2 eye. Like he can be the type of guy that gets back there and causes the problems. But for me, I look at this game and I said, listen, I'm trusting Lamar Jackson. He's playing like he wants his 3rd MVP and he wants to get to the playoffs again and this time cash in on that opportunity. And I think this game is the Ravens going to be too much. I think the Ravens going to be too much for him. I do think if like Kyle talked about, if they can get out to a fast start, put Baker Mayfield in basically catch-up mode, that's the perfect situation to be in because then when you take away the run game, you make him throw all game, he's going to give you some that you say, you know what, we can get our hands on.
To me, Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson is peanut butter and jelly. It's one of those things that, it's not too fancy. It's exactly what we expected it to be. You look at a peanut butter jelly sandwich sitting on the counter and you like, you know what? That sandwich right there is going to be exactly as good as I think that it's going to be. And that's exactly what Lamar and Derrick Henry have been. So with that being said, though, we do got to talk about this Broncos Saints Thursday night football game.
We were having
and I
so
got
much
to tell
fun.
you, Broncos fans don't like me, and I don't care. Your team's not good. I don't care what the record is. We're talking about it now. Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Do want to let you guys know, though, that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, yes, NFL fans, I am talking to you. You can start the second quarter of the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, open up the FanDuel app. You can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. FanDuel is an all-encompassing hub of football information. And right now, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Make sure that you head to FanDuel and check out America's #1 sportsbook at FanDuel.com. All right, Dame, we're going to cap off today's FanDuel Friday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Talked about some big games in the NFC North. Talked about a Super Bowl rematch and a team that may make the Super Bowl and the Baltimore Ravens with the way things look right now. I do want to dive into this Thursday night football game, Dame. We are going to talk a little bit about the Broncos and the disaster that is the New Orleans Saints. But first, we're going to do just a little quick one here. I want to make sure to get these two in for my folks looking for the best wagers. I love the Pittsburgh Steelers +1.5 at home against the Jets. You're giving the Steelers points at home going against a Todd Downing offense. No way I'm passing that up. I really love a teaser with Kansas City +1.5 and the Steelers +1.5. Tease both those up with 6 points. Get Steelers at home +7.5. Chiefs +7.5. Love that teaser there. And then Jacksonville Jaguars money line. I don't care that it's -230. The Jaguars are going to destroy the New England Patriots. I know that the Jags aren't a very good team. I know, but they've been in London for an extra week. That's a big advantage. Drake May, healthy, not. Brissett back in. Doesn't matter. That offensive line against Travon Walker and Josh Allen Hines. So Steelers +1.5 in a teaser with Kansas City. Jags money line. Real quick, rapid fire. What do you think of those?
I think I like them. I like them. I got the Jags also. That New England Patriots offensive line is not good. I feel bad for Drake May going all the way to London for the first time and having to deal with that defensive line. That should be licking their chops right now, waiting on that game.
Yeah, 100%. But anyways, we will move. I've tried to avoid it all episode, but we will move to the Thursday night football game. And look, again, shout out to my guy, Ross Jackson, the mastermind. Yes. He would be here with me. And I think, honestly, if he could choose, he would rather be here with me doing the show than cover that abomination of a game. 33-10, but the Broncos were in control the whole time. And Ross understands that as well.
In what might have been the absolute worst performance of the 2024 NFL season, the New Orleans Saints may be undergoing some changes. I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast, walking through the bowels of the Superdome at the moment on my way to the Dennis Allen presser and post-game pressers and everything like that. And I can very much imagine that there are going to be a lot of question marks about Dennis Allen's future and sort of the future of this team and what they're going to look like in the not just coming weeks, but also, of course, their future this offseason. So this is just about as bad as it gets for an NFL team and just about as bad a brand of football as we have seen from the New Orleans Saints in quite some time. An absolute drumming by the former head coach on a night where you're supposed to be honoring your Hall of Fame, future Hall of Fame quarterback. It just could not have gone worse for the New Orleans Saints, who also lost several key players to injury. A 10-33 drumming that felt like an 84-0 contest.
Three things real quick, Dave. Number one, the Saints are awful and they need to fire Dennis Allen and move on after the year. They're probably going to be in a position to get a top 5 pick if they don't get, some of these players back. So that's number one. Number two, Paulson Adebo, the cornerback who got hurt during the game, broken femur. You know how hard it is to break your femur? I broke my femur in a head-on car accident when I was 21 years old. Like, you got to be in like a car accident or a violent sports collision to even break that bone. It's the hardest bone in your body to break. Shout out to Paulson. I know what the recovery from that can be like. It could take full year, man. Like, for a pro athlete, just my heart goes out to him. And number three, I do not care what the Broncos record is. Next week, they play the lowly Panthers, and they're going to go to 5-3. I don't care what their record is. That is not a good football team. Look, the defense is good. The special teams plays good, but that offense is bad. Bo Nix is not good. And if the Broncos do happen to make the playoffs, I will bet my life savings on them losing in the wild card. That is not a good football team.
No, they're not. They're in the AFC. If they make the wild card, I'm probably going to predict like a 21-point loss.
I mean, they're going to be 5-3. They're beating the Panthers. You know, they're a well-coached team. They just don't have the talent on offense. So, like, they're going to make it, I think.
Like, it's crazy because, like, during this game, there were throws that, Bo Nix, and I remember writing in my report, his footwork, his mechanics are so inconsistent and bad in the pocket where he gets very erratic. One of the scouting terms we use is quiet and loud feet in the pocket. You could tell guys who are calm, cool, collected, their feet are quiet. You watch Tom Brady, he's standing straight up. Peyton Manning, he's standing straight up, and they're just sliding. CJ Stroud, they're just gliding and moving. Bo Nix's feet are as loud as a 90s boombox. And it's like, he just, like, you saw it at the overthrow. I think where he had a tight end and then another receiver.
Oh, he had another receiver downfield wide open for a touchdown, and he's tapping his feet like a tap dancer in the pocket.
His feet. I'm just like, Bo, but see, the issue with that is Bo is a 5-year starter in college. Right. That's not a problem you should have as a 5-year starter. The reps were there for you. Started every single game, like from Auburn to Oregon. Plenty of time to develop. So for me, man, no, I don't believe that they are a good enough offense to, like, we're going to see. You're going to see the Chiefs where that defense is going to give your offense every bit of problems that you can handle. They're going to stop the run game, force Bo Nix to throw in the tight windows, and then what? You know what I mean? You're going to lose that game. I just don't foresee them being a team that we should be able to talk about come playoff time, because they are offensively, they're not there yet. That defense is playing lights out. Love what they're doing defensively. Offensively, Bo Nix has a lot to be able to prove before I can even start to buy in.
And trust me, I'm someone, you talk about a 90s boombox. I cover Will Levis every Sunday. His feet are like a rocket ship taking off in the pocket. I mean, this guy he looks like that Australian break dancer from the Olympics, the way that he's moving around. So I know a little bit of something about loud feet in the pocket, but Broncos fans hate me, and I don't care. I hate you too. But with that being said, that's going to do it for us on today's FanDuel Friday edition of Locked On NFL. Make sure that you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins, the barber, in the barbershop, going over the rest of this excellent slate in Week 7. But that's going to do it for my co-host, Damian Parson. That's going to do it for me, the madman, Tyler Rowland. As I tell you guys every episode, stay safe out there.